Hi guys, my name is Rita Malala and I'm a sophomore in high school. I took APHUG last year and I did pretty well on the test. Um, Today we're going to be talking about spatial organization of agriculture and settlement pattern. Just to make sure, guys, can you guys can you guys hear me? Can you guys see me and hear me pretty well? Can you give me a thumbs up in the comments if you can see me and hear me pretty good? Okay, I see yes. All yeses. My voice is lagging. Let me see if I can fix that. Is it a low voice or it's just lagging? Can you guys hear me better like that? Okay, we'll start and we'll see how it goes. Sorry, just a second. Okay. So these are the weekly stream calendar for our 5 streams for this week. Guys, I highly encourage you guys, if you're taking more than one AP class, to come to these sessions because they're pretty helpful and I think it's very worth it. It's like private tutoring. It's pretty helpful if you're taking more than one AP, and it's a very good recap for the test. And the test is coming up. Guys, there's less than 100 days for the AP testing week. So get ready and start studying. We have Mondays, we have math and English subject. Tuesdays are mostly social sciences. Wednesdays are science-based, and then Thursdays are mostly history classes. Excited, yes, excited too. Don't forget to follow us on Think Fiveable on Twitter, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Before starting, can you guys type down in the comment section where are you guys what are you guys studying in class right now? What unit are you guys studying about? Because we're gonna cover agriculture today. I just want to make sure. Unit 4, Unit 5, okay. Okay, the political section is right before the agriculture section, I believe, right? Unit 5 is agriculture section. Okay. So our agenda today, we're gonna be introducing agriculture. What is agriculture? Its origins, the first agricultural revolution, the domestication hearths, the types of farming practices, and then the second agricultural revolution and the results it accomplished, and then finally the von Thünen model. So what is agriculture? What do you guys think agriculture is? Type a very, very, very short response in the comment section. Just a couple of words. Farming, okay. That's correct, farming. Okay, I see a lot of farming, yeah. Yep, plants, yeah. And livestock, yeah. I was looking for livestock. So agriculture is not only the cultivation of plants. Obviously, it's also the rearing of animals. So here we have the modification of Earth's surface through cultivation of plants, and the rearing of animals. And it can be done for economic gains or for sustainability gains. For economic gains would be for obviously making money, like commercial agriculture, like we have in the U.S. The Midwest in the U.S. Right? We have a lot of massive, very big farmlands that they use for commercial agriculture for selling the food, right? And sustainability will be like cultivating a very small. It will be on a smaller scale, and it would be only for consumption. So I would, for example, have a small farm, right? I will cultivate specific fruits and crops to sustain my family and for consumption, not for any economic gains. So the origins of agriculture. Before agriculture was invented, people, hunters and gatherers, right? Hunters and gatherers fished and gathered plants. And they moved a lot in search of food. Because there was no food available, they would move from places to places in search of food and water. That's how we stay alive, right? We need food and water. Agriculture was discovered accidentally by hunters and gatherers. Historians believe that agriculture started when hunters and gatherers they would drop seeds, right? Because they gathered berries and fruits that just grew by themselves, right, on trees. So they realized whenever they dropped these seeds, they started growing, right? So that's when agriculture is believed occurred. Um, before agriculture, people would obviously migrate a lot because there was no food and they were just looking for food to survive, right? Hunters and gatherers still exist in today's world, in Australia and India specifically, but they exist not because we don't have food or there's a lack of food, right? A food supply. This is not the reason why they exist. They exist because it's cultural. They believe it's a cultural. They believe they exist because of cultural reasons. They think they don't want to they're basically isolated groups in the forest or specific areas where they don't really want to interact with the rest of the world because of cultural reasons. The first agricultural revolution. First agricultural revolution is when people started domesticating plants and animals. Because people started growing plants and animals, like we talked before, people did not stop migrating from places to places in search of food. So settlements started, right? So people would settle in places in clustered settlements, right? And they would plant their food. And usually the settlements were near rivers and resources, right? Because you need water to cultivate, right? And cultivate plants and animals, right? To both of them. So due to supply, settlements were created, and many historians believe that the first agricultural revolution happened right after the first ice age, and the reason for that is because you really cannot grow anything in the ice, right? After the ice age was pretty good for cultivation, and population grew because of the supply, because of the high supply, because of the supply of food, right? Because there's more people, less starvation, more people survive, and there's more nutritional gains from the different crops that are grown. Hearths of Domestication. You guys by now should know what hearths are. What are hearths? Type down a very short answer in the comment section. I see origins. Okay, origins. Yeah, exactly. Where ideas or concepts originated. So hearths of domestication basically places, regions in the world where certain animals and plants came from. A lot of those regions, like the Fertile Crescent, the Indus River, they're very close to natural resources. Like the Fertile Crescent is very close to the Euphrates River, I believe, right? So it's very likely for plants to originate in these regions because there's resources that would make it possible for these plants to be cultivated, right? So this is a picture. This is a map of the different animals and plants and their different origins, right? I think it's very important to know some of those. I don't of course you're not gonna memorize this whole map, but I think it's very important to know a couple of these animals and their origins, animals and plants and their hearths, because I think it will be like a bonus if you write it down. Like, for example, if you have an FRQ about it, I think it would be very beneficial to cite something, write down an example. Do you guys have any questions about what we just covered? Is everything pretty clear? The slide before this was just the four main Hearths of Domestication: the Fertile Crescent, the Indus River Valley, the Southeast Asia, and Central Asia. Okay, Kayla, you're welcome. Okay, let's move on. There's no more any questions. Okay. Agriculture. What is agriculture affected by? I think these are the four main points that affect agriculture. So availability of resources, like we talked before, availability of resources, that would include like water. I mean, in the beginning of agriculture, that would be the main thing: water and fertile land, right? So, for example, if there is no water and it's a very hot and dry region, most likely people would there would be no crops, right? There cultivation of crops will not. I'm so sorry, guys. Cultivation of crops will not succeed in those regions, right? Because there's no resources. How are you gonna grow plants without water? And cultural practices. Cultural practices is kind of an interesting one because it's basically affected by culture. So the way, for example, a group like a culture distinctive group would cultivate, for example, a specific plant might be like culturally acceptable in their society, but other methods might, like other technological, more advanced method of planting might be more beneficial, but because of the culture, they're always going to do it in their way, right? Because of the culture they're living in. Physical environment, the two, sorry, the two, where is it? Okay, so the two pictures on the slides are example of that. Okay, we have a couple of questions on. If you guys want to ask questions, ask it in the ask a question section, because sometimes I'm not reading the comment sections, I miss it. So Islams cannot have pork. Is this an example of how culture affects agriculture? That's not, yeah, Isa, right? I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Isa. Pork, it's a taboo, right? It's taboo for Muslims to eat pork. So most likely you're not gonna have people people call domesticating pigs, right? In the Middle East. In the Middle East, because that's the most Islamic dominant region in the world. But it does not, obviously, it does not mean that there are no pigs there, but it's less likely because they're not used for consumption. They might be used, I don't know if porks or if pigs are used for like agriculture, but I don't believe that exists. But they're not called, they're not being raised for consumption, especially in that region of the world, because it's a taboo, right? Physical environment, I don't think we covered that. Physical environment would be an example of the two pictures on the slides. I have a picture of the Euphrates River and the picture of the Alps Mountains, right? Obviously, you're not gonna cultivate plants and rear animals on mountains, right? On rocky mountains, because it just doesn't make sense. It's not gonna be successful. But as opposed to the Euphrates River in the Middle East, where because of the flooding and the availability of water and the resources, right? the land is very fertile, and it's very good for cultivating plants, because that's why there are a lot of plants that originated in that region of the world because of the availability of resources. And climate conditions, this is a big one too. Climate conditions, specific plants cannot be grown, only can be grown under specific climates, right? For example, like the one that comes always to my mind is aloe vera and cactus, right? These two plants are only grown in very desert-like places and very dry and hot places, right? So you cannot grow anything in any climate, right? Any climate conditions. Climate affect the kind of the type of crops that are grown, and because of that, a lot of people, obviously, a lot of regions of the world, they import different plants, right? For that, like I live in California here, right? We import a lot of like avocados and bananas from Mexico, right? Because their climate there is way more better than what we can cultivate here in California. Where's the next slide? Just a second, sorry. Okay. Okay, type of agriculture. The two like categories agriculture falls into is intensive agriculture and extensive. Okay, without like reading this, tell me what's the difference between intensive and extensive from the tell me what's the difference between intensive and extensive. Do you guys know? You can type down a very short. Intensive equals labor. Isa, extensive can equal to technology, but it's not required, right? It's not required. Limited labor, yeah. Limited labor and a lot of labor, right? So intensive, obviously, right, requires a lot of labor or is focused on a small plot of land. Intensive agriculture will most likely happen in third world, third world countries that are poor. I would say like regions in Africa, maybe regions in Asia. I would not say maybe Asia. Yeah, regions in Asia will have a lot of like wet rice fields. That would be an intensive agriculture because you're using a small field to cultivate like rice, right? To grow rice, but it requires a lot of workers. A lot of workers. Extensive agriculture, on the other hand, does not require a lot of labor, and it's spread across areas of land. Like Isa said, it does not require a lot of workers because of technology. So the picture on the left will be example of extensive, right? Because we're using we can see it's a very large land, right? It's a very large land, and there's only like we don't see any workers working, right? And most of the work is done by machines, and obviously they're more efficient and faster than intensive agriculture. And usually intensive, like we said before in the beginning, intensive agriculture is usually done for sustainable reasons, while extensive is more like commercial regions. Commercial reasons. Sorry, guys. I'm talking too fast and cannot control it. Okay. So here's some examples of intensive and extensive farming. Extensive farming, some examples of intensive farming are market gardening. Market gardening would be like small fields where like fresh vegetables, fruits, and like flowers are grown, but it's mostly the purpose of it is to sell like fresh produce to local like grocery stores and markets, right? So that would be an intensive farming because they're not really cultivating that much fruit. Grace, what do you mean you can't see the words? What words you cannot see? You can't see my slide? I've been talking this whole time. You guys can't see the slide? Oh, I'm sorry. Cause of the pictures. You guys are taking notes from these slides or what? Are you guys taking notes? You guys need this? What do you? Okay, that's how you get credit, okay. Not bad. I wish I could get credit last year from doing this. I did it and got no credit, just did it to study. Is that it, guys? Are you guys done? Right? You're done, right? You're done with the slide? Can I move on? Okay. So like we talked about, market gardening is intensive because they're not really growing that much produce. They're just growing enough fresh, 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 fresh produce to sell to markets. Plantation agriculture, mixed crop and livestock systems. Mixed crop and livestock systems basically means that animals are reared for the purpose of um cultivating crops. That would be intensive because obviously animals will not manual work and the rearing of animals will not produce enough, will not be as fast. It won't be as fast as efficient as machines working, right? Extensive farming, some examples of extensive farming include shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation is, does anybody know what shifting cultivation is? Let's see. Can you guys type something down in the chat? What is shifting cultivation? Any responses? Any responses? Okay, Marcus. I hope I'm saying that right. This is right. Shifting cultivation is the is a method of planting, right? Where like massive like plantations or like forests, for example, are burned because they're burned for like a year. Like, they're burned and then they're left abandoned for a year, for a period of time. The purpose of that is to produce I don't know what it's called, but some chemical substance in the land that will cause the land to be fertile and good for growing, right? It will have the right nutrients to produce crops. So that would be an example of shifting cultivation because they're burning down like massive, very massive areas. So, and mostly they're not going to be done manually. Obviously, there will be a lot of work. Usually, machines are used for them. Nomadic herding and ranching would be another example of extensive farming methods. Yeah, that would be a slash and burn. It would also be called shifting cultivation. Spatial organization. So special agricultural practices shape different rural land use patterns. So depending on the type of, obviously like we talked about the environment, the climate, the type the type of crops will be determined by these factors, right? The environmental factors. Depending on the type of crop being cultivated in a region, the way the settlement would be very different. Like, for example, like some of these settlement like patterns will be like clustered, dispersed, or linear. An example of that will be wet rice fields. They're mostly grown in like linear patterns, like this second picture in the middle here. Linear patterns, that's how the field usually is cultivated to maximize the production, right? Another field, it's getting warm in here, guys. Sorry. Another pattern would be a dispersed pattern where there's no really any pattern, just farming fields are in different places, in different regions, and it's just based on where people settle. And then clustered is basically clustering over one specific area. Usually this happens around like a church or a farm where people would go to church, or that's where people would get their food, right? If they're clustered or they're very near a farm. Any question, guys, about this? Do you guys do you guys have, oh, okay, there is one question over here. I guess intensive is like family farms, and extensive is like factory farms. Exactly, yeah. This is you got the point, Marcus. Yeah, so families will, if they're usually, well, this still exists. Intensive farming in among like poor families in third world countries still exists, where obviously families will cultivate specific crop to sustain themselves, and potentially to sell it, depending on the region of the world. Like in Africa, yes, that can happen, but like here in the US, obviously these small factories, family farms will not be able to compete with the large corporations, right? And extensive is like factory farms, exactly. Like in the US, we have a lot of factory farms, and they're their whole idea obviously is to commercials, right? To make money, and the faster and the more efficient that can be done, the work can be done, the cultivation of these animals and these plants, the more money and the faster economical gain will be, right? So good job, Marcus. You got that. Any more questions? No questions? No questions? Nucleated means like clustered. It's like nucleus. Okay, I guess it comes from the word nucleus. Nucleus is the main center of something, like the nucleus of the cell is the center of the cell. So they are centered around a nucleus, if that makes sense. I guess this is where the word comes from. Any more questions? Nope. Okay, let's move on. Spatial. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I lost my other slide. Okay. Where I can navigate through these. Okay. So second agricultural revolution. The second agricultural revolution is when technology, God introduced this whole agriculture, right? I believe this happened in the, let's see, in the 1600s, 17th century, I believe, right? And if I'm not wrong, it is first originated in the agricultural revolution originated in Britain, and then from there it diffused to the other parts of the world, right? So new technology, right? The development of new technology and new machines that made it easier and faster and more efficient to cultivate and produce crops, right? It led to an increase in food production, obviously, right? Because the method of producing food became faster and easier, which led obviously to more food production. Because there is more food production, life expectancy will just go up, booming, right? Because there's more food, more people are gonna live, more people are gonna have food, and more people are gonna live. Nobody's gonna die out of starvation or malnutrition, right? And then longer life expectancy, obviously, because there's more, I guess, more food and more like nutritional food. And more there. Okay, the last bullet point is an important one. More people available to work in factories because of the mechanization and because farming became more efficient. Less people needed to work as farmers because there is so much food, and we don't really need more farmers to work. So many people moved to other parts of the part of the industries. Other people started working in factories after, like in the textile factories, for example, in the Industrial Revolution. And because due to that, because people started working in other fields of the economy, not just farming, there was a shift. I believe this is covered in APHUG. There's a shift in population where many people moved from the rural areas to the inner cities in search for works, right? In search of work opportunities. And the picture here is an example of this. Is it this? I believe this is the. Does anybody remember? What is this machine? I forgot the name of it. It is the cotton gin. Yes, 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 yes. Good job, Anon. Good job, Anon. Thank you, thank you. It's a cotton gin, and it was invented by Jethro Tull, I believe, right? No, it's not. I don't think it's Eliud. I think it's Jethro Tull. Yes, it was. Yeah. So, the purpose of this is it was used for, obviously, to remove the seeds from cotton. So back then, okay, so I'm gonna tell you the whole idea with slavery because somebody already mentioned it. This was developed. The inventor wanted to create this thing to make slaves like work less, because once like they would harvest the cotton, right, they had to remove the seeds from the cotton, and this whole process was pretty tedious and pretty tiring, because it's very hard to remove the seeds from the cotton. There's multiple seeds in each like cotton ball, so it will take a long time. So this was invented to make it easier, and this machine basically did it by itself without like real manual work. There was some kind of manual work because there was no really any like engines created by that time, but it made it so much easier and more efficient and faster. Okay. As a result of mechanizations and today's world, so large-scale commercial agriculture operations are replacing small family farms. We already went over that. Like in the US here, we have a lot of commercial agriculture. Like our whole produce, that's where we get. You guys see me pretty good? I see a reflection of my face. Okay. Okay, so because in the US, there's most of the produce we get is from commercial agriculture, and because of that, most of the farmlands are like massive, big farmlands, and they're all mostly are being operated by a couple of farmers using machines. So because of that, there are no small family farms. You don't see really small family farms here in the US because it's a first world country and people can work in other sectors of the economy, not really farming much. This can apply to third world countries, but we really don't like, for example, I'm gonna use African countries for example too, because they're the region of the world that's the least developed, right? And family farms still exist there. Still exist there. Sorry guys, just a second. Trying to I lost okay, sorry guys. Technical difficulties. Okay. Um family, yeah, we were talking about Africa and third world countries. These family farms do exist in Africa because there are really no commercial agriculture in that region of the world, because people are very poor. There are no industries or like the government does not, like, there's a lot of corruption in that region of the world, you guys don't know. So the government does not do like subsidizes any of like like or businesses or commercial businesses for growing food, right? Because the government is very corrupt and the people there are very poor and they don't really cannot afford food because there are no job opportunities and they're not being paid very well. So it's kind of very sad to see that unequal like distribution of resources. Like, people are starving there not because there is no food in the world, not because there is no food in the world, but because of the unequal distribution of food. Another result of the mechanization is the complex commodity chains link production and consumption. What do you guys know what complex commodity chains are? If you guys have not covered this unit, I don't think expect you guys to know it, but does anybody have any idea what complex commodity chains are? It's a big vocab word in that unit. Does anybody know what complex commodity chains are? So commodity chain is a process used by firms to gather resources, transform them into goods or commodities, and finally distribute them to consumers. It is series of links connecting the many places of production, distribution, and resulting commodity that is then exchanged on the world market. Marcus, you explained it way better than I could. That's right. This is what commodity chains are. Because the commodity chains obviously is the process. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just gonna close the window for a bit because the sun is reflecting right on the camera. Just a second, sorry. Is this better? I think this is better, right? Okay. So complex commodity chains are the process of producing a specific good. So I think I have a, let me see. Oh, I lost the, sorry guys. I have a diagram of this. Yeah. So there are like 3 stages of this. The first, the getting the raw material. An example of this would be like getting raw materials. Usually this process happened in third world countries where there are a lot of people that would work, because getting the raw materials, for example, like getting gold out of the caves, mining is pretty tedious, and many people in the first world countries will not work in these kind of jobs, right? So these the getting raw materials usually happens in less developed countries, where but obviously resources have to be available, not just because the less developed countries this happens in, because resources have to be available in that region of the world, and there should be available workers to get those resources out, right? And then these resources are transported. There's raw materials are transported to manufacturing and assembly lines, right? An example of manufacturing and assembly lines would be obvious, like your main two. You guys have to know this. Your main two would be India and China. India and China. The reason for that is because India and China, they have the population is like, they have a lot of people. They have a lot of people that want to work, and many of them are, the majority of them, many of them are not educated, and these jobs do not require any kind of skill or any kind of degree, right? So these jobs would be great. An example of manufacturing and assembly would be like the yarn spilling, yarn spill. Example of that would be yarn spinning. Yarn spill. Sorry, guys. Yarn spinning in Asia and India. A lot of women, especially women, work in this industry because it does not really require a lot of skill, and many of these stuff right now are being done using machines, but still a lot of workers are needed, even with the mechanization. And then the final stage is the distribution of these goods. And usually the distribution of these goods happen in the more developed countries. I'm gonna give you like Apple as an example. A lot of like like, for example, Apple, right? A lot of iPhones are assembled in China, and then they're transported to like first world countries like the US, for example, where people can afford buying these devices, right? So this would be an example of a complex commodity chain. And the third bullet point, technology has increased economies of scale in the agriculture sector and carrying capacity of the land. So technology has technological advances has increased the carrying capacity of the land. What is carrying capacity, guys? Do you know what carrying capacity is? Can you guys write down something on the chat? What is carrying capacity? You guys should have learned that in the population unit of this course. So it is the limit to population. It can be the limit of population, yes. Maximum something can be with available resources, yes. Resources limit population. Yes, this can be, Marcus, this can be applied in the population, like in the growth of population. Yes, the carrying capacity of the region depends on the resources available in the region. So the population will keep growing until it reaches that point where growth cannot occur because there's no resources for people. People cannot live beyond, like you can't have more people supported by these resources because there are none, right? There's not any available. But for what we're discussing here, technology has increased the carrying capacity of the land, which means that more crops can be grown in like a specific like area, like a square meter. You can grow so much. You can use that square meter to grow so much and produce so much more produce that you could 100 of years ago, right? 100 of years ago, because there's technology and there's different, like, even like other technological advances would be like chemicals and chemicals, yeah, chemicals uh, that will make the production and the cultivation of plants way more faster and will increase the carrying capacity of the land. Let's go. How do we move on? Okay. Any questions, guys, on this section? By now, we have one more concept to cover and we're done. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, no questions. We'll move on. How do we move on? Let's move on. Let's move on. Okay. Sorry, guys. Keep having technical difficulties. Okay, Thünen model. This model is, I believe I had something about it last. Yeah, I had a question. I don't know if I can talk about it, but I had a question about this model last year in the test. So, and guys, please make sure to know these models. They're pretty important. I mean, I I they were emphasized a lot last year by my teacher. We had some questions about them, but they were not, like, the test was mainly based on the other, like, units, not just the models. But the models were, like, pretty good to know. Like, you guys should be familiar with most of them. There are like 15 of them, I think, right? They're pretty a lot, but you guys should be familiar with them. So the Thunen model. So his main model discusses the transportation cost versus the distance from market, right? So the important transportation cost, the association of that with the distance from a market. Regions of specialty farming do not always abide to one eccentric rings. Okay, I want to see the model. Okay, so his whole idea is that the region where markets are depend on the cost and the type of 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 goods they produce. For example, like dairy farm, the market is in the middle, right? The market is in the middle where people, and the urban center, the market is in the middle where people are living, where people are consuming stuff, right? So dairy farming would be very close to the market. You guys know why? Can you guys type down something in the group chat of why would be dairy farming the closest to the market as opposed to, like, I don't know, ranching and livestock? You guys know? That's right. That's right. I thought they are perishable. So it would not be efficient to have dairy farming very far, right? Because they're not gonna last that long. They're not gonna last that. They're gonna spoil, and then they're not gonna be sold, right? So there is no reason for them to be that far. Forests. Okay, so forests are very close to the market too, because the transportation of wood is very expensive, right? They're pretty close because the transportation of wood is very heavy. Transportation of that would be very will cost a lot. So that's why it's very close to the gardening. Grains and field crops. Grains and field crops are pretty far because, like, grains and crops can last for a long time, right? And their transportation is not really that cost costly, right? They're not really that costly. I mean, they're pretty heavy, but compared to forest and daily dairy farming, they're less expensive to transport. And finally, ranching and livestock is all the way out there because you really don't need animals and livestock looking for food in the market. They're not really going to benefit anybody, and they're just gonna take up land, right? So they're just taking the land that's very far, the farthest from the market. This is one of the very important like economical models in the scores. So we are mostly done, guys. Do you guys have any questions about whatever we talked about? Yes, you can see the text behind this. Okay. It's not much. It's just explaining the main idea of the model. Okay, we have one question popped up. Any information on vertical farming in cities? This is futuristic concept. Any info on vertical farming in cities? Vertical farming in cities? I'm really not familiar with the concept because usually cities don't really have a lot of. I would assume vertical farming is the linear pattern in fields, but I would assume that in like cities, busy cities don't really have a lot of farmlands because it's very like populated, right? Populated with different industries, but not really farming because as we saw in the model, the farmlands and are very far from the city. So I'm really not familiar with the concept, but if it is covered in the next, it will definitely be covered in the next streams. I really have not heard of it, like vertical farming in cities, because I'm usually farming does not happen in cities, so I don't really know how to answer it. I don't want to say something that is not true. So that's basically it, guys, for this stream, guys. Thank you for being here, for showing up. I hope that was helpful, guys. And again, you guys are done with this, right? You guys don't need this anymore, right? Guys, don't forget to follow us again on Think Fightable on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, guys. Guys, if you found this helpful or these streams helpful, guys, please invite your friends. It will really be helpful for you guys. Since we're approaching the test, guys, we're approaching AP testing, and you guys should start studying because we're only like less than 100 days away. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning, but we're less than 100 days away, and you guys gotta start studying. Okay, I have one more question. Okay, this is a good question, Isa. Can you explain the pros and the cons of biotechnology? So biotechnology is basically using biology and technology, right? It's using science to develop biological like chemicals to to use in agriculture. An example of that would be a lot of the chemicals, right? Chemicals used in um in our foods. Like our foods, like if you don't get organic foods, it's full of chemicals. It is produced because of chemicals. That's the only honestly way to make food, because one of the pros is that it makes production of food way more faster. Guys, I just want to reading this again sounds like a homework problem I'm answering. I hope it's not a homework problem. I hope, because I feel like I'm doing somebody's homework for them. That should not happen, but I'm gonna answer it this time. So one of the pros um is that it makes the production of food way more faster. The U.S. this population is is a lot, right? And we don't really have enough farmland to produce we don't really have enough farmland to produce like all organic food, honestly. So biotechnology would be the only reason for us to produce sustainable enough food for the whole population. And the cons, obviously, chemicals, they have a lot of biological like harm. They can be harmful. They can be harmful for the bodies, especially if they're not used in the right amounts. Especially if they're not used in the right amounts. So this is the main two pros and cons. It can be. I didn't really go into detail a lot about it, but these are the main like pros and cons about the concept. We're done, guys. Any more questions? Any? Can I be any more helpful than I am right now? So again, guys, don't forget to. We're talking about coming to these reviews. If you guys find these reviews helpful, please invite your friends and show up to these other AP sessions if you're taking any more APs. So we're done, guys. Thank you for showing up. Have a nice rest of the day. And don't forget to study. You guys gotta study for the test because it's coming up. Bye.